Did you hear what I was playing, Lane?
I don't think it's polite to listen, sir.
Oh, I am sorry for that. Have you got the cucumber sandwiches cut for Lady Bracknell?
Yes, sir.
Oh, by the way, Lane, I see from your book that on Thursday evening, when Lord Shoreham and Mr. Worthing were dining with me, 8 bottles of champagne are entered as having been consumed.
Yes, sir. 8 bottles and a pint.
Why is it that at a bachelor's establishment, the servants invariably drink the champagne? I ask merely for information.
I attribute to the superiority quality of the wine, sir. I've often observed that in many married households, the champagne is rarely of a first-rate brand.
Good heavens! Is marriage so demoralizing as that?
I believe it is a very pleasant state, sir. I myself have had very little experience up to the present. I've only been married once, as a consequence of a misunderstanding between myself and the young person.
I don't know that I am much interested in your family life, Lane.
No, sir. It isn't a very interesting subject. I never think of it myself.
Very natural, I'm sure. The bell, Lane.
Yes, sir.
Lane's views on marriage seem somewhat lax. Really, if the lower orders don't set us a good example, what on earth is the use of them? They seem as a class to have no sense of their moral responsibility.
Mr. Ernest Worthing.
How do you do, my dear Ernest? What brings you up to town?
Oh, pleasure, pleasure. What else should bring one anywhere? Eating as usual, I see, Algy.
I believe it is customary in good society to take some slight refreshment at 5 o'clock. Where have you been since last Thursday?
Oh, in the country.
What on earth do you do there?
When one is in town, one amuses oneself. When one is in the country, one amuses other people. It is excessively boring.
And who are the people you amuse?
Oh, neighbors, neighbors.
Got nice neighbors in your part of Shropshire?
Perfectly horrid. Never speak to any of them.
How immensely you must amuse them. By the way, Shropshire is your county?
Shropshire? Yes, of course. Hello. Why all these cups? Why cucumber sandwiches? Who is coming to tea?
Oh, merely Aunt Augusta and Gwendolyn.
How perfectly delightful.
There may be, but I'm afraid Aunt Augusta won't quite approve of your being here.
May I ask why?
My dear fellow, the way you flirt with Gwendolyn is perfectly disgraceful. It is almost as bad as the way Gwendolyn flirts with you.
I am in love with Gwendolyn. I've come up to town expressly to propose to her.
I thought you would come up for pleasure. I call that business.
How utterly unromantic you are.
There isn't anything romantic in proposing. Why, it is very romantic to be in love, but there's nothing romantic about a definite proposal. Why, one may be accepted. One usually is, I believe. Then the excitement is all over. The very essence of romance is uncertainty. Please don't touch the cucumber sandwiches. They're ordered specially for Aunt Augusta.
You've been eating them all this time.
Yes, she's my aunt.
What shall I eat then?
Have some bread and butter. The bread and butter is for Gwendolyn. Gwendolyn is devoted to bread and butter.
And very good bread and butter it is, too.
Well, my dear fellow, you need not eat it as if you're going to eat it all. You behave as if you are married to her already. You are not married to her already, and I don't think you ever will be.
Why on earth do you say that?
In the first place, girls never marry the men they flirt with. Girls don't think it right.
That's nonsense.
It isn't. It's a great truth. It accounts for the extraordinary number of bachelors one sees all over town. In the second place, I don't give my consent.
Your consent?
My dear fellow, the way you behave with Gwendolyn is perfectly disgraceful. And Gwendolyn is my first cousin. Before I allow you to marry her, you will have to clear up the whole question of Cecily.
Cecily? By the name of Cecily? I don't know anyone of the name of Cecily.
Lane, bring me the smoking cigarette case that Mr. Worthing left in the smoking room the last time he dined here.
Yes, sir.
Do you mean to say you've had my cigarette case all this time? I wish to goodness you had let me know. I've been writing frantic letters to Scotland Yard about it. I was nearly offering a large reward.
Well, I wish you would offer one, and seem to be more than usually hard up.
Well, there's no good in offering a large reward now that the thing is found.
I think it rather mean of you, Ernest, I must say. However, now that I look in the inscription inside, I find the thing isn't yours after all.
Of course it's mine. You've seen me with it 100 times, and you have no right whatsoever to read what is written inside. It's a very ungentlemanly thing to read the inside of a private cigarette case.
Yes, but it is not your cigarette case. This case is a present from someone of the name of Cecily. And you said you didn't know anyone of that name.
Well, if you must know, Cecily happens to be my aunt.
Your aunt?
Yes, charming old lady she is too. Lives at Tunbridge Wells. Just give it back to me, Algy.
Yes, but why does your aunt call herself Little if she is your aunt and lives at Tunbridge Wells? From Little Cecily with her fondest love.
My dear fellow, what on earth is there in that? Some ants are tall, some ants are not tall. That is surely a matter that an ant may be able to decide for herself. You, however, think that every ant should be exactly like your ant. That is absurd. Just give it back to me, Algy.
Yes, but why does your aunt call you her uncle if she is your aunt and lives at Tunbridge Wells? From Little Cecily with her fondest love to her dear Uncle Jack. There is no objection, I admit, to an aunt being a small aunt. But why an aunt, no matter what her size may be, should call her own nephew her uncle is perfectly absurd. Besides, your name isn't Jack at all. It is Ernest.
It isn't Ernest, it's Jack.
You've always told me it was Ernest. I have introduced you to everyone as Ernest. You answer to the name of Ernest. You look as if your name is Ernest. You are the most earnest-looking person I know. It is perfectly absurd you're saying that your name isn't Ernest. It is on one of your cards. Here is one of them. Mr. Ernest Worthing, B4, The Albany. I shall keep this as proof that your name is Ernest if you ever attempt to deny it to me, or to Gwendolyn, or to anyone else.
Well, my name is Ernest in town and Jack in the country, and the cigarette case was given me in the country.
Yes, but that does not account for the fact that your small Aunt Cecily, who lives in Tunbridge Wells, calls you her dear uncle. Now tell me the whole thing. I may mention that I have always suspected you of being a confirmed and secret Bunburyist, and I am quite sure of it now.
Bunburyist? What on earth do you mean by a Bunburyist?
I'll reveal to you the meaning of that incomparable expression as soon as you are kind enough to inform me why you are Ernest in town and Jack in the country.
Well, produce my cigarette case first.
Here it is. Now produce your explanation.
Well, old Mr. Thomas Cardew, who adopted me when I was a little boy, made me, in his will, guardian to his granddaughter, Miss Cecily Cardew. Cecily, who addresses me as her uncle, from motives of respect that you could not possibly appreciate, lives at my place in the country, under the charge of the admirable governess, Miss Prism.
Where is that place in the country, by the way?
That is nothing to you, dear boy. You are never going to be invited. I may tell you candidly that the place is not in Shropshire at all.
I suspected that. I have Bunburied all over Shropshire on 2 separate occasions. Now go on. Why are you Ernest in town and Jack in the country?
My dear fellow, when one is placed in the position of guardian, one must adopt a very high moral tone on all subjects. It is one's duty to do so. And since a very high moral tone can hardly be said to conduce much to either one's health or happiness, in order to get up to town, I have always pretended to have a younger brother of the name of Ernest, who lives at the Albany and gets into the most dreadful scrapes. There, my dear Algy, is the whole truth, pure and simple.
The truth is rarely pure and never simple. What you are is a Bunburyist. You're one of the most advanced Bunburyists I know.
What on earth do you mean by Bunburyist?
You have invented a very useful younger brother by the name of Ernest in order that you may go up to town as often as you like. I have invented an invaluable perfect invalid by the name of Bunbury in order that I may go into town as often as I choose. Bunbury is extremely invaluable. If it wasn't for his extraordinary bad health, for instance, I wouldn't be able to dine with you tonight at the Carlton, for I've been really engaged to Aunt Augusta for more than a week.
I haven't asked you to dine with me anywhere tonight.
I know. You're absurdly careless about sending out invitations. It is very foolish of you. Nothing annoys people so much as not receiving invitations.
You had much better dine with your Aunt Augusta.
I haven't the smallest intention of doing anything of the kind. To begin with, I dine there on Monday, and once a week is quite enough to dine with one's own relations. In the second place, whenever I do dine there, I am treated as a member of the family and set down with either no woman at all or 2. In the third place, I know exactly whom she will place me next to tonight. She will place me next to Mary Farquhar, who always flirts with her own husband. That is not very pleasant. In fact, it is not even decent, and that sort of thing is enormously on the increase. The amount of women in London who flirt with their own husbands is perfectly scandalous. It looks so bad. is simply washing one's clean linen in public. Besides, now that I know that you are a Bunburyist, I naturally want to talk to you about Bunbury. I want to tell you the rules.
I'm not a Bunburyist at all. If Gwendolyn accepts me, I'm going to kill Ernest. Indeed, I think I'll get rid of him in any case. Cecily is a bit too much interested in him. It is rather a bore. So I'm going to get rid of Ernest, and I strongly advise you to do the same with with your invalid friend who has the absurd name.
Nothing will induce me to part with Bunbury. And if you ever get married, which seems to be extremely problematic, you'll be very glad to know Bunbury. A man who marries without knowing Bunbury has a very tedious time of it.
Now that's nonsense. If I marry Gwendolyn, and she is the only girl who I ever saw in my life that I would marry, I certainly don't want to know Bunbury.
Then your wife will. You seem to forget, my dear fellow, that in married life, 3 is company and 2 is none. Ah, that must be Aunt Augusta. Now, if I get her out of the way for 10 minutes, in order that you might have an opportunity of proposing to Gwendolyn, can I dine with you tonight at the Carlton?
I suppose so if you want to.
Yes, but you must be serious about it. I hate people who aren't serious about their meals. It is so shallow of them.
Lady Bracknell, Miss Fairfax.
Well, dear Algernon, I hope you are behaving well.
I am feeling well, Aunt Augusta.
That's not the same thing. In fact, the two rarely go together. Good afternoon, Mr. Worthing. How do you do?
Dear me, you are smart.
I am always smart, aren't I, Mr. Worthing?
You are quite perfect, Miss Fairfax.
Oh, I hope I'm not that. For that would leave me no room for developments. And I intend to develop in many directions.
I'm sorry if we're a little late, Algernon, but I was obliged to call on dear Lady Harbury. I hadn't been there since her poor husband's death. I never saw a woman so altered. She looks quite 20 years younger. I'll have a cup of tea and one of those nice cucumber sandwiches you promised me.
Good heavens, Lane. Why are there no cucumber sandwiches? I ordered them specially.
There were no cucumbers in the market this morning, sir. I went down twice.
No cucumbers?
No, sir. Not even for ready money.
Thank you, Lane. That will do.
Thank you, sir.
I am greatly distressed, Aunt Augusta, about there being no cucumber sandwiches. Not even for ready money.
Oh, it really makes no matter, Algernon. I had some crumpets with Lady Harbury, who seems to me to be living entirely for pleasure now.
I hear her hair has turned quite gold from grief.
It certainly has changed color. From what cause, I of course can't say. Thank you. I've quite a treat for you tonight, Algernon. I'm going to send you down with Mary Farquhar. She is such a nice young woman, and so attentive to her husband. It's delightful to watch them.
I'm afraid, Aunt Augusta, I shall have to give up the pleasure of dining with you tonight after all.
I hope not, Algernon. It would put my table completely out. Your uncle would have to dine upstairs. Fortunately, he's accustomed to that.
It is a great bore, but the fact is I've just had a telegram to say that my poor friend Bunbury is very ill again. They seem to think I should be with him.
It is very strange. This Mr. Bunbury seems to suffer from curiously bad health.
Yes, poor Bunbury is a dreadful invalid.
Well, I must say, Algernon, that I think it is a high time this Mr. Bunbury makes up his mind whether he was going to live or die. This shilly-shallying with the question is absurd, nor do I in any way approve of this modern sympathy with invalids. I consider it morbid. Illness of any kind is hardly a thing to be encouraged in others. Health is the primary duty of life. I'm always telling that to your poor uncle, but he never seems to take much notice, as far as improvements to his many ailments goes. I would be much obliged if you would ask Mr. Bunbury, from me, to be kind enough not to have a relapse on Saturday, for I rely on you to arrange my music for me. It is my last reception, and one wants something that will encourage conversation, particularly at the end of the season, when everyone has practically said whatever they've had to say.
I'll speak to Bunbury, Aunt Augusta, if he is still conscious, and I think I can promise you he'll be all right on Saturday. Of course, the music is a great difficulty, but I'll run over the program I've drawn out, if you'll come into the next room for a moment.
Thank you, Algernon. It is very thoughtful of you. I'm sure the program will be delightful after a few expurgations. Gwendolyn, you will follow.
Certainly, Mama.
Charming day it has been, Miss Fairfax.
Pray, don't talk to me about the weather, Mr. Worthing. Whenever people talk to me about the weather, I feel certain that they mean something else. And it makes me so nervous.
I do mean something else.
I thought so.
And I would like to take advantage of Lady Bracknell's temporary absence.
I would certainly advise you to do so. Mama has a way of coming back suddenly into a room that I've had to speak with her about.
Miss Fairfax, ever since I met you, I have admired you more than any girl I've ever met. Since I met you.
Yes, I'm quite aware of that fact. And I often wish that in public, at any rate, you'd been more demonstrative. For me, you've always had an irresistible fascination. Even before I met you, I was far from indifferent to you. We live, as I hope you know, Mr. Worthing, in an age of ideals. The fact is constantly mentioned in the more expensive monthly magazines. My ideal has always been to love someone of the name Ernest. There is something in that name that inspires absolute confidence. From the moment Algernon first mentioned to me that he had a friend called Ernest, I knew I was destined to love you.
You really love me, Gwendolen?
Passionately.
Oh, darling, you don't know how happy you've made me.
My own Ernest.
Of course. But you don't mean to say that you couldn't love me if my name wasn't Ernest.
But your name is Ernest.
Yes, I know it is. But supposing it was something else. Do you mean to say you couldn't love me then?
Oh, that is clearly metaphysical speculation, and like all metaphysical speculations, has very little reference to the actual facts of life as we know them.
Well, personally, darling, to speak quite candidly, I don't care much about the name of Ernest. I don't think the name suits me at all.
It suits you perfectly. It is a divine name. It has a music of its own. It produces vibrations.
Well, really, Gwendolen, I must say, I think there are many other much nicer names. I think Jack, for instance, is a charming name.
Jack? No. There is very little music in the name Jack, if any at all, indeed. It does not thrill. It produces absolutely no vibrations. I have known several Jacks, and they all, without exception, were more than usually plain. Besides, Jack's notorious domesticity for John, and I pity any woman who is married to a man called John. She would probably never be allowed to know the entrancing pleasure of a single moment's solitude. The only really safe name is Ernest.
Gwendolen, I must get christened at once. I mean, we must get married at once.
Married, Mr. Worthing?
Well, surely. You know that I love you, and you led me to believe, Miss Fairfax, that you weren't completely indifferent to me.
Well, I adore you, but you've not proposed to me yet. Nothing has been said at all about marriage. The subject has not even been touched upon.
Well, may I propose to you now?
Oh, I think it would be an admirable opportunity. To spare you any possible disappointment, Mr. Worthing, I think it only fair to tell you quite frankly beforehand that I'm fully determined to accept you.
Then you will marry me, Gwendolen.
Of course I will, darling. How long you've been about it. I'm afraid you've had very little experience in how to propose.
My own one, I have never loved anyone in the world but you.
Yes, but men often propose for practice. Oh, Ernest, what wonderfully blue eyes you have. They're quite blue. I hope you will always look to me like that, especially when there are other people present.
Mr. Worthing! Rise, sir, from this semi-recumbent posture. It is most indecorous.
Mamma, I must beg you to retire. This is no place for you. Besides, Mr. Worthing has not quite finished yet.
Finished what, may I ask?
I'm engaged to be married to Mr. Worthing, Mamma.
Pardon me. You are not engaged to be married to anyone. When you do become engaged to anyone, I or your father, should his health permit him, will inform you of the fact. An engagement should always come on a young girl as a surprise, pleasant or unpleasant as the case may be. It is hardly a matter that she should be allowed to arrange for herself. And now I have a few questions to put to you, Mr. Worthing. And while I am making these inquiries, you, Gwendolen, will wait for me below in the carriage.
Mamma.
In the carriage, Gwendolen. Gwendolen, the carriage!
Yes, Mamma.
You can take a seat, Mr. Worthing.
Thank you, Lady Bracknell. I prefer standing.
bound to tell you that you are not down on my list of eligible young men, although I have the same list as the Duchess of Bolton has. We work together, in fact. However, I'm quite ready to enter your name, should your answers be what a really affectionate mother requires. Do you smoke?
Well, yes, I must admit I smoke.
I'm glad to hear it. A man should always have an occupation of some kind. There are far too many idle men in London as it is. How old are you?
28.
A very good age to be married at. I have always been of the opinion that a man who desires to get married should either know everything or nothing. Which do you know?
I know nothing, Lady Bracknell.
I am pleased to hear it. I do not approve of anything that tampers with natural ignorance. Ignorance is like a delicate, exotic fruit. Touch it, and the bloom is gone. What is your income?
Between 7,000 and 8,000 a year.
In land or investment?
In investments, chiefly.
That is satisfactory. But between the duties expected of one during one's lifetime and the duties exacted from one after one's death, land has ceased to either be a profit or a pleasure. It gives one position and prevents one from keeping it up. That's all that can be said about land.
I have a country house with some land, of course, attached to it. About 1,500 acres, I believe.
A country house? How many bedrooms? Well, that point can be cleared up afterwards. You have a townhouse, I hope. A girl with a simple, unspoiled nature like Gwendolen could hardly be expected to reside in the country.
I own a house in Belgrave Square, but it is let by the year to Lady Bloxham. Of course, I can get it back whenever I like at 6 months' notice.
Lady Bloxham? I don't know her.
She goes about very little. She's a lady considerably advanced in years.
Ah, nowadays that is no guarantee of respectability of character. What number at Belgrave Square?
149.
Oh, the unfashionable side. I thought there was something. However, that can be easily altered. Now to minor matters. Are your parents living?
I have lost both my parents.
Both? To lose one parent may be regarded as a misfortune. To lose both seems like carelessness. Who was your father? He seems to have been a man of wealth. Was he born into what the radical papers call a purple of commerce, or did he rise from the ranks of aristocracy?
I'm afraid I don't really know. The fact is, Lady Bracknell, I said I had lost both my parents. It would be near the truth to say that my parents seem to have lost me. I don't really know who I am by birth. I was found.
Found?
The late Mr. Thomas Cardew, an old man of a very charitable and kindly disposition, found me and gave me the name of Worthing because he had in his pocket at the time a first-class ticket to Worthing. Worthing is a seaside resort in Sussex.
Where did this charitable gentleman, who had a first-class ticket to this seaside resort, find you?
In a handbag.
A handbag?
Yes, Lady Bracknell. A rather large leather handbag with handles to it. An ordinary handbag, in fact.
In what locality did this Mr. Thomas Cardew come across this ordinary handbag?
In the cloakroom at Victoria Station. It was given him in mistake for his own.
Mr. Worthing, I confess I feel somewhat bewildered by what you have just told me. To be born, or at any rate bred in a handbag, whether it had handles or not, seems to me to display a contempt for the ordinary decencies of family life that remind one of the worst excesses of the French Revolution, and I presume you know what that unfortunate movement led to. As for the particular locality in which the handbag was found, a cloakroom at a railway station that might serve to conceal a social indiscretion has probably indeed been used for that purpose before now, but can hardly be assured for a recognized position in good society.
May I ask what you would advise me to do, then? I need hardly say I would do anything in the world to ensure Gwendolen's happiness.
I would strongly advise you, Mr. Worthing, to try and acquire some relations as soon as possible, and make a definite effort to produce, at any rate, one parent of either sex before the season is quite over.
Well, I don't see how I can possibly manage to do that, Lady Bracknell. I can produce the handbag at any moment. It is in my dressing room at home. I'm sure that should satisfy you, Lady Bracknell.
Me, sir? What has it to do with me? You can hardly imagine that I and Lord Bracknell would dream of allowing our only daughter, a girl brought up with the utmost care, to marry into a cloakroom and form an alliance with a handbag. Good morning, Mr. Worthing.
Good morning. Don't play that ghastly tune, Algy. Howdy, y'all.
Didn't it go off all right, old boy? You don't mean to say Gwendolyn refused you?
Oh, as far as Gwendolyn is concerned, we are engaged. Her mother is perfectly unbearable. Never met such a gorgon. You don't suppose there's any chance of Gwendolyn becoming like her mother in about 150 years, do you, Algy?
All women become like their mothers. That is their tragedy. No man does, that's his.
Is that clever?
It is perfectly phrased and quite as true as any observation in civilized life need be.
I am sick to death of cleverness. Everybody is clever nowadays. You can't go anywhere without meeting clever people. The thing has become an absolute public nuisance. I wish to goodness we had a few fools left.
We have.
I should extremely like to meet them. What do they talk about?
The clever people? The fools? Oh, about the clever people, of course. Now, by the way, did you tell Gwendolyn the truth about your being Ernest in town and Jack in the country?
My dear fellow, the truth isn't the sort of thing one tells to a nice, sweet, refined girl. What extraordinary ideas you have about the way to behave to a woman.
The only way to behave to a woman is to make love to her if she is pretty, and to someone else if she is plain.
Oh, that's nonsense.
What about your brother? What about the profligate Ernest?
Oh, by the end of the week I shall have got rid of him. I'll say he died in Paris of apoplexy. Lots of people die of apoplexy quite suddenly, don't they?
Yes, but it's hereditary, my dear fellow. It's the sort of thing that runs in families. You had better say a severe chill.
You are sure that a severe chill isn't hereditary or anything of that kind?
Of course it isn't.
Very well, then. Poor Ernest is suddenly carried off in Paris by a severe chill. Let's get rid of him.
But I thought you said that Miss Cardew was a little too interested in your poor brother Ernest.
Oh, that's all right. Cecily is not a silly romantic girl at all. She has a very capital appetite and goes for long walks and never pays any attention to her lessons.
I should like to see Cecily.
I will take very good care that you never do. She's excessively pretty and only just 18.
Have you told Gwendolyn that you have an excessively pretty young ward who's only just 18?
One doesn't blurt these things out to people. Gwendolyn and Cecily are perfectly certain to be extremely great friends. I'll bet you anything you like. Half an hour after they have met, they will be calling each other sister.
Women only do that after they have called each other a lot of other things first. Now, if we want to get a good table at the Carlton, we really must go and dress. I'm hungry.
I never knew you when you weren't.
Miss Fairfax.
Gwendolyn, upon my word.
LG, kindly turn your back. I have something very particular to say to Mr. Worthing.
Really, Gwendolyn, I don't think I can allow this at all.
Pray, oblige me by turning your back. Ernest, we may never be married. From the expression on Mamma's face, I fear we never shall. Few parents nowadays pay any regard to what their children have to say to them. The old-fashioned respect for the young is rapidly dying out. Any influence I had over Mamma I lost at the age of 3. But though she may prevent us from becoming man and wife, and I may marry someone else and marry often, there is nothing she can possibly do that can alter my eternal devotion to you.
Oh, dear Gwendolyn.
The story of your romantic origin, as related to me by Mamma with unpleasing comments, has naturally stirred the deeper fibers of my nature. Your Christian name is an irresistible fascination. The simplicity of your character makes you exquisitely incomprehensible to me. Your town address at the Albany I have. What is your address in the country?
The Manor House, Walton, Hertfordshire.
How long do you remain in town?
Till Monday.
Good. LG, you may turn around now.
Thanks, I've turned around already.
You may also ring the bell.
You will let me see you to your carriage, my own darling.
Certainly.
I will see Miss Fairfax out.
Yes, sir.
Tomorrow, Lane, I'm going Bunburying.
Yes, sir.
I probably shall not be back till Monday. You can put on my dress clothes, the smoking jacket, and all the Bunbury suits.
Yes, sir.
I hope tomorrow will be a fine day, Lane.
It never is, sir.
Lane, you are a perfect pessimist.
I do my best to give satisfaction, sir.
There's a sensible, intellectual girl. The only girl I ever cared for in my life. What are you so amused at?
Oh, I'm just a little anxious about poor Bunbury, that's all.
If you don't take care, your friend Bunbury is going to get you into a serious scrape someday.
I love scrapes. They're the only things that are never serious.
Oh, that's nonsense, Algy. You never speak anything but nonsense.
Nobody ever does. Besides, I love nonsense.
Cecily, Cecily, surely it is more Moulton's duty to water the flowers than yours. Your German grammar is on the table. Pray, open it at page 15. We will repeat yesterday's lesson.
But I don't like German. It isn't at all a becoming language. I know perfectly well that I always look quite plain after my German lesson.
Child, you know how anxious your guardian is that you should improve yourself in every way. He laid particular stress on your German as he was leaving for town yesterday.
Dear Uncle Jack is so very serious. Sometimes he is so serious that I think he cannot be quite well.
Your guardian enjoys the best of health, and his gravity of demeanor especially to be commended in one so comparatively young as he is. I know no one who has a higher sense of duty and responsibility.
I suppose that is why he so often looks a little bored when we three are together.
Cecily, I am surprised at you. Mr. Worthing has many troubles in his life. Idle merriment and triviality would be out of place in his conversation. You must remember his constant anxiety about that unfortunate young man, his brother.
I wish Uncle Jack would allow him to come here sometimes. We might have a good influence over him, Miss Prism. I am sure you certainly would. You know German and geology and things of that kind that influence a man so much.
I do not think that even I could produce any effect on a character that, according to his brother's own admission, is irretrievably weak and vacillating. Indeed, I'm not sure that I would desire to reclaim him. I'm not in favor of this modern mania of turning bad people into good people at a moment's notice. You must put away your diary, Cecily. I really don't see why you should keep a diary at all.
I keep a diary in order to enter the wonderful secrets of my life. If I didn't write them down, I'd probably forget all about them.
Memory, my dear Cecily, is the diary we all carry about with us.
Yes, but it usually chronicles the things that have never happened and couldn't possibly have happened. I believe memory is responsible for nearly all the novels that Moody sends us.
Do not speak slightingly of novels, Cecily. I wrote one myself in earlier days.
Was your novel ever published?
Alas, no. The manuscript unfortunately was abandoned. I prefer to use the word in a sense of lost or mislaid. To your work, child, these speculations are profitless.
But I see dear Dr. Choswell coming up through the garden.
Dr. Choswell, this is indeed a pleasure.
And how are we this morning? Miss Prism, you are, I trust, well.
Miss Prism has just been complaining of a slight headache. I think it would do her so much good to have short stroll with you in the park, Dr. Choswell.
Cecily, I have not mentioned anything about a headache.
No, dear Miss Prism, I know that. But I felt instinctively that you had a headache. Indeed, I was thinking about it, not about my German lesson, when the dear rector came in.
I hope, Cecily, that you are not inattentive.
I'm afraid I am.
That is strange. Were I fortunate enough to be Miss Prism's pupil, I would hang upon her lips. I spoke metaphorically, the metaphor drawn from B. Mr. Worthing, I suppose, has not returned from town yet.
We do not expect him till Monday afternoon.
Ah, yes. He usually likes to spend a Sunday in London. He is not one of those whose sole aim is enjoyment, as by all accounts that unfortunate young man his brother seems to be. But I must not disturb Egeria and a pupil any longer.
Egeria? My name is Letitia, Doctor.
A classical allusion merely, drawn from the pagan authors. I will see you both, no doubt, at evensong.
I think, dear doctor, I will have a stroll with you. I find I have a headache after all, and a walk might do it good.
With pleasure, Miss Prism, with pleasure. I think we might go as far as the schools and back.
That will be delightful. Cecily, you will read your political economy in my absence. The chapter on the fall of the rupee you may omit. It is somewhat too exciting for a young girl.
Horrid political economy, horrid geography, horrid German!
Mr. Ernest Worthing has just driven up from the station. He's brought his luggage with him.
Mr. Ernest Worthing before the Albany? Uncle Jack's brother! Did you tell him that Mr. Worthing was in town?
Yes, miss. He seemed very much disappointed. I told him that you and Miss Prism were in the garden. He said he was anxious to speak to you privately for a moment.
Ask him to come out here. I suppose you better speak to the housekeeper about a room for him.
Yes, miss.
I feel rather frightened. I've never met any really wicked person before. I'm afraid he will look just like anyone else. He does!
You are my little cousin Cecily, I'm sure.
You are under some strange mistake. I'm not little. In fact, I believe I'm more than usually tall for my age. But I am Cousin Cecily. You, I see from your card, are Uncle Jack's brother. My cousin Ernest. My wicked cousin Ernest.
I'm not really wicked at all, Cousin Cecily. You mustn't think I'm wicked.
If you are not, then you have certainly been deceiving us all in a very inexcusable manner. I hope you have not been leading a double life, pretending to be wicked and being really good all the time. That would be hypocrisy.
Of course, I have been rather reckless.
I am glad to hear it.
In fact, now that you mention the subject, I have been very bad in my own small way.
I don't think you should be so proud of that, though I'm sure it must have been very pleasant.
It is much pleasanter being here with you.
I can't understand how you were here at all. Uncle Jack won't be back till Monday afternoon.
That is a great disappointment, as I am obliged to go up on Monday morning.
I think you had better wait till Uncle Jack arrives. I know he wants to speak to you about your emigrating.
About my what?
You're emigrating. He is sending you to Australia.
Australia? I'd sooner die.
Well, he said at dinner on Wednesday night that you would have to choose between this world, the next world, and Australia.
Oh, well. The accounts I have received of Australia and the next world are not at all encouraging. This world is good enough for me, Cousin Cecily.
Yes, but are you good enough for it?
I'm afraid I'm not. That is why I want you to reform me. You might make it your mission, if you don't mind, Cousin Cecily.
I'm afraid I've no time this afternoon.
Then would you mind my reforming myself this afternoon?
It is rather quixotic of you, but I think you should try.
I will. I'm feeling better already.
You are looking a little worse.
That is because I am hungry.
How thoughtless of me. I should have remembered that when one is going to lead an entirely new life, one requires regular and wholesome meals. Won't you come in?
Thank you. Won't you give me a rose?
A Maréchal Niel?
No, I'd sooner have a pink rose.
Why?
Because you are like a pink rose, Cousin Cecily.
I don't think it can be right for you to talk to me like that. Miss Prism never says such things to me.
Then Miss Prism is a very short-sighted old lady. You are the prettiest girl I ever saw.
Miss Prism says that all good looks are a snare.
They're a snare that every sensible man would like to be caught in.
I don't think I would care to catch a sensible man. I wouldn't know what to talk to him about.
Where is Cecily? You are too much alone, dear Dr. Chasuble. You should get married. A misanthropy I can understand. A womanthropy never.
The precept, as well as the practice of the primitive church, was distinctly against matrimony.
That is obviously the reason why the primitive church has not lasted up to the present day. And you do not seem to realize, dear doctor, that by persistently remaining single, a man converts himself into a permanent public temptation. Men should be more careful. This very celibacy leads weaker vessels astray.
But is a man not equally attractive when married?
No married man is ever attractive except to his wife.
And often I've been told, not even to her.
But where is Cecily?
Perhaps she followed us to the schools.
Mr. Worthing.
Mr. Worthing.
This is indeed a surprise. We did not expect you till Monday afternoon.
I have returned sooner than I expected. Dr. Chasuble, I hope you are well.
Mr. Worthing, I trust this garb of woe does not betoken some terrible calamity.
My brother.
More shameful debts and extravagancies?
Still leading his life of pleasure.
Dead.
Your brother, Ernest, dead?
Quite dead.
What a lesson for him. I trust he will profit by it.
Mr. Worthing, I offer you my sincere condolences. You have at least the consolation of knowing that you are the most generous and forgiving of brothers.
Poor Ernest. He had many faults, but it is a sad blow.
Very sad indeed. Were you with him at the end?
No, he died abroad in Paris. I had a telegram last night from the manager of the Grand Hotel.
Was the cause of his death mentioned?
Severe chill, it seems.
None of us are perfect. I myself am particularly susceptible to drafts. Will the intimate take place here?
No, he seems to have expressed a desire to be buried in Paris.
In Paris? I fear that hardly points to any very serious state of mind at the last. You would no doubt wish me to make some slight allusion to this tragic domestic affliction on Sunday. My sermon on the meaning of the manna in the wilderness can be adapted to almost any occasion, joyful, or as in the present case, distressing. I have delivered it at harvest celebrations, christenings, confirmations, on days of humiliation, and festal days. The last time I delivered it was in the cathedral, as a charity sermon on behalf of the Society for the Prevention of the Discontent among the Upper Classes. The bishop who was present was much struck by some of the analogies I drew.
Ah, that reminds me. You mentioned christenings, I think, Dr. Chasuble. I suppose you know how to christen, all right? I mean, you are continually christening, aren't you?
It is, I regret to say, one of the rector's most constant duties in his parish. I've often spoken to the poorer class on the subject, but they don't seem to know what thrift is.
But is there any particular infant in whom you are interested, Mr. Worthing? Your brother was, I believe, unmarried, was he not?
Oh, yes. Quite unmarried.
People who live entirely for pleasure usually are.
Oh, it is not for any child, dear doctor. I'm very fond of children. The fact is, I would like to be christened myself this afternoon, if you have nothing better to do.
But surely, Mr. Worthing, you have been christened already.
I don't remember anything about it. Of course, I don't know if the thing would bother you in any way, or if you think I'm a little bit too old now.
Not at all. The sprinkling and indeed immersion of adults is a perfectly canonical practice.
Immersion?
Oh, you need have no apprehensions. Sprinkling is all that is necessary, or indeed I think advisable. Our weather is so changeable. At what hour would you wish the ceremony to be performed?
Oh, I might trot round about 5, if that would suit you.
Oh, perfectly. In fact, I have 2 similar ceremonies to perform at that time. A case of twins that occurred recently in one of the outlying cottages of your very own estate. Poor Jenkins, the carter, a most hard-working man.
Oh, I don't see much fun in being christened along with other babies. It would be childish. Would 5:30 do?
Admirably, admirably. And now, dear Mr. Worthing, I will not intrude into a house of sorrow any longer. I would merely beg you not to be too much bowed down by grief. What seem to us bitter trials are often blessings in disguise.
This seems to me a blessing of an extremely obvious kind.
Uncle Jack! I'm pleased to see you back. What horrid clothes you've got on. Do you go and change them?
Cecily.
Uncle Jack, what is the matter? Do you look happy? You look as if you had a toothache, and I've got such a surprise for you. Who do you think is in the dining room? Your brother.
Who?
Your brother. He arrived here half an hour ago.
I haven't got a brother.
Don't say that. However badly he may have behaved to you in the past, he is still your brother. You couldn't be so heartless as to disown him. I'll tell him to come out, and you will shake hands with him, won't you, Uncle Jack?
These are very joyful tidings.
After we had all resigned to his loss, his sudden return seems to me peculiarly distressing.
My brother's in the dining room? I don't know what it all means. I think it's perfectly absurd. Good heavens!
Brother John, I have come up from town to tell you that I am very sorry for all the trouble I've given you, and I intend to lead a better life in the future.
Go away.
Uncle Jack, you are not going to refuse your own brother's hand.
Nothing will induce me to take his hand. I think his coming here is disgraceful. He knows perfectly well why.
Uncle Jack, do be nice. There's some good in everyone. Ernest has been telling me about his poor invalid friend, Mr. Bunbury, whom he goes to visit so often.
Of course, I admit the faults were all on my side, but I think Brother John's coldness to me peculiarly painful, especially considering it is the first time I have come here.
Uncle Jack, if you don't shake hands with Ernest, I will never forgive you.
Suppose I must, then.
It is pleasant, is it not, to see so perfect a reconciliation? I think we will leave the two brothers together.
Cecily, you will come with me.
Certainly, Miss Prism.
Algy, you must get out of this place as soon as possible. I don't allow any Bunburying here.
I have put Mr. Ernest's things in the room next to yours, sir. I suppose that is all right.
What?
Mr. Ernest's luggage, sir. I have unpacked it and put it in the room next to your own.
I'm afraid I can only stay a week this time.
Merriman, order the dog cart at once. Mr. Ernest has been suddenly called back to town.
Yes, sir.
Jack, Cecily is a darling.
Don't talk about Miss Cardew like that. I don't like it.
Well, I don't like your clothes. You look perfectly ridiculous in them. Why on earth don't you go and change? It's perfectly childish to be in deep mourning for a man who happens to be staying with you for a whole week in your own house as a guest. I call it grotesque.
You will not be staying with me for a week as a guest or anything else. You've got to leave by the 4:05 train.
I certainly won't leave you while you are in mourning. It would be most unfriendly. If I were in mourning, you would stay with me, I suppose. I should consider it most unkind if you didn't.
Well, will you go if I change my clothes?
Yes, if you are not too long. I've never seen anyone take so long to dress with such little result.
Well, at any rate, it is better than always being overdressed as you are.
Ah, there you are.
Oh, I merely came back to water the flowers. I thought you were with Uncle Jack.
He's gone to order the dog cart for me.
Was he going to take you for a nice drive?
He's going to send me away.
Then we have got to part.
I am afraid so.
The dog cart is at the door, sir.
It can wait, Merriman. For 5 minutes?
Yes, miss.
I hope, Cecily, I shall not offend you if I state quite openly and frankly that you seem to me to be in every way the visible personification of absolute perfection.
I think your frankness does you great credit, Ernest. If you allow me, I will copy your remarks into my diary.
Do you really keep a diary? I'd give anything to look at it, may I?
Oh, no. You see, it is simply a very young girl's record of her own thoughts and impressions, and consequently meant for publication. But pray, Ernest, don't stop. I delight in taking down from dictation. I have reached absolute perfection. You can go on, I'm quite ready for more.
Cecily, ever since I first saw your wonderful and incomparable beauty, I've dared to love you wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly.
I don't think you should tell me that you love me wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly. Hopelessly doesn't seem to make much sense, does it?
Cecily.
The dog cart is waiting, sir.
Tell it to come next week, the same hour.
Yes, sir.
Uncle Jack would be very much annoyed if he knew you were staying on till next week at the same hour.
I don't care about Jack. I don't care about anyone in the whole world but you. I love you, Cecily. You will marry me, won't you?
You silly boy, of course. Why, we have been engaged for the last 3 months.
For the last 3 months?
Yes, it will be exactly 3 months on Thursday.
But how exactly did we become engaged?
Well, ever since Uncle Jack first confessed to us that he had a younger brother who was very wicked and bad, you of course have formed the chief topic of conversation between myself and Miss Prism. And of course, the man who is much talked about is always very attractive. One feels there must be something in him after all. I dare say it was foolish of me, but I fell in love with you, Ernest.
Darling, and when was the engagement actually settled?
On the 14th of June last, worn out by your entire ignorance of my existence, I determined to end the matter one way or the other, and after a long struggle with myself, I accepted you here. The next day, I bought this little ring in your name. And this is the bangle with the true lover's knot I promised you always to wear.
Did I give you this? It's very pretty, isn't it?
Yes, you've wonderfully good taste, Ernest. It's the excuse I've always given for your leading such a bad life. And this is the box in which I keep all your dear letters.
But my own sweet Cecily, I've never written you any letters.
You need hardly remind me of that, Ernest. I remember only too well that I was forced to write your letters for you. I wrote always 3 times a week and sometimes oftener.
Oh, do let me read them, Cecily.
Oh, I couldn't possibly. They would make you far too conceited.
What a perfect angel you are, Cecily.
You dear romantic boy. I hope your hair curls naturally. Does it?
Yes, darling, with a little help from others.
I'm so glad.
You won't break off our engagement, will you, Cecily?
I don't think I could break it off, now that I have actually met you. Besides, of course, there's the question of your name.
Yes, of course.
You must not laugh at me, darling, but it had always been a girlish dream of mine to love someone whose name was Ernest. There is something in that name. It seems to inspire absolute confidence. I pity any poor married woman whose husband is not called Ernest.
But my own sweet child, do you mean you couldn't love me if I had some other name?
But what name?
Oh, any name you like. Algernon, for instance.
But I don't like the name of Algernon.
I can't see why you should object to the name of Algernon. It is not at all a bad name. In fact, it is a rather aristocratic name. But seriously, Cecily, if my name was Algie, couldn't you love me?
I might respect you, Ernest. I might admire your character. But I fear I would not be able to give you my undivided attention.
Cecily, your rector here is, I suppose, thoroughly experienced in the practice of the rites and ceremonials of the church.
Oh, yes. Dr. Chasuble is the most learned man. He has never written a single book, so you can imagine how much he knows.
I must speak to him at once, on a matter of important christening. I mean, business. I'll be back in half an hour.
What an impetuous boy he is. I like his hair so much. I must enter his proposal in my diary.
Miss Fairfax has just called to see Mr. Worthing. On very important business, Miss Fairfax states.
Isn't Mr. Worthing in his library?
Mr. Worthing went over in the direction of the rectory some time ago.
And Miss Fairfax? I suppose one of the many elderly good women who are associated with Uncle Jack in some of his philanthropic work in London. I don't quite like women who are interested in philanthropic work. I think it is so forward of them.
Yes, miss.
Pray, ask the lady to come out here. Mr. Worthing is sure to be back soon. And you can bring tea.
Yes, miss. Miss Fairfax.
Pray, let me introduce myself to you. My name is Cecily Cardew.
Cecily Cardew, what a very sweet name. Something tells me we are going to be great friends. I like you really more than I can say. My first impressions of people are never wrong.
How nice of you to like me so much after we have known each other such a comparatively short time. Pray sit down.
I may call you Cecily, may I not?
With pleasure.
And you will always call me Gwendolyn, won't you?
If you wish.
Oh, then it is all settled, is it not?
I hope so.
Perhaps this might be a favorable time for my mentioning who I am. My father is Lord Bracknell. You have never heard of Papa, I suppose?
I don't think so.
Outside the family circle, Papa, I am glad to say, is entirely unknown. I think this is quite as it should be. The home seems to me to be the proper sphere for a man. Cecily, Mama, whose views on education are remarkably strict, has brought me up to be extremely short-sighted. So, do you mind me looking at you through my glasses?
Oh, not at all, Gwendolyn. I'm very fond of being looked at.
You are here on a short visit, I suppose?
Oh, no, I live here.
Really? Well, then your mother, no doubt, or some female relative of advanced years, resides here also.
Oh, no, I have no mother, nor in fact any relations.
Indeed.
My dear guardian, with the assistance of Miss Prism, has the arduous task of looking after me.
Your guardian?
Yes, I am Mr. Worthing's ward.
Oh, which is strange. He never mentioned to me that he had a ward. How secretive of him. He grows more interesting hourly. I cannot say, however, that the news inspires me with feelings of unmixed delight. I like you, Cecily. I've liked you ever since I met you. But I feel bound to state that now that I know that you are Mr. Worthing's ward, I cannot help expressing the wish that you were
Well, just a little older than you seem to be, and not quite so very alluring in appearance. In fact, if I may speak candidly...
Pray do. I think that whenever one has anything unpleasant to say, one should always be quite candid.
Well, to speak with perfect candor, Cecily, I wish you were fully 40 and more than usually plain for your age. Ernest is a man of a strong, upright nature. He is the very soul of truth and honor. But even men of the noblest possible moral character are extremely susceptible to the influence of the physical charms of others.
I beg your pardon, Gwendolen. Did you say Ernest?
Yes.
But it is not Mr. Ernest Worthing who is my guardian. It is his brother, his elder brother.
Ernest never mentioned to me that he had a brother.
I'm sorry to say they have not been on good terms for a long time.
Well, that accounts for it. And now I think of it, I've never heard any man mention his brother. The subject seems distasteful to most men. Of course, you are quite sure that it is not Mr. Ernest Worthing who is your guardian?
Quite sure. In fact, I'm going to be his.
I beg your pardon?
Dear Gwendolen, there's no reason why I should make any secret of it to you. Our little county newspaper is sure to chronicle the fact next week. Mr. Ernest Worthing and I are engaged to be married.
I believe there must be some slight error, Miss Cardew. Mr. Ernest Worthing is engaged to be married to me. The announcement will appear in the Morning Post on Saturday at the latest.
I'm afraid you must be under some misconception. Ernest proposed to me exactly 10 minutes ago.
It is certainly very curious, for he asked me to be his wife yesterday afternoon at 5:30. If you care to verify the incident, pray do so. I never travel without my diary. I am so sorry if it is any disappointment to you, Cecily, but I'm afraid I have the prior claim.
It would distress me more than I can tell you, dear Gwendolen, if it caused you any mental or physical anguish. But I feel bound to point out that since Ernest proposed to you, he has clearly changed his mind.
If the poor fellow has been entrapped into any foolish promise, I consider it my duty to rescue him at once, and with a firm hand.
Whatever unfortunate entanglement my dear boy may have got into, I will never reproach him with it after we are married.
Do you allude to me, Miss Cardew, as an entanglement? You are presumptuous. On an occasion of this kind, it becomes more than a moral duty to speak one's mind. It becomes a pleasure.
Do you suggest, Miss Fairfax, that I entrapped Ernest into an engagement? How dare you? This is no time for wearing the shallow mask of manners. When I see a spade, I call it a spade.
I am glad to say that I've never seen a spade. It is obvious that our social spheres have been widely different.
Shall I lay the tea here as usual, miss?
Yes, as usual.
Quite a well-kept garden, this is, Miss Cardew.
So glad you like it, Miss Fairfax.
I had no idea there were flowers in the country.
Oh, flowers are as common here, Miss Fairfax. People are in London.
Personally, I cannot understand how anyone manages to exist in the country. If anybody who is anybody does. The country always bores me to death.
That is what the newspapers call agricultural depression, is it not? I believe the aristocracy are suffering very much from it just at present. It is almost an epidemic amongst them, I have been told. May I offer you some tea?
Thank you.
Sugar?
No, thank you. Sugar is not fashionable anymore.
Cake or bread and butter?
Bread and butter, please. Cake is rarely seen in the best houses nowadays. You have filled my tea with lumps of sugar, and though I ask most distinctly for bread and butter, you have given me cake. I am known for the gentleness of my disposition and the extraordinary sweetness of my nature. But I warn you, Miss Cardew, you may go too far.
To save my poor, innocent, trusting boy from the machinations of any other girl, there are no lengths to which I would not go.
From the moment I saw you, I distrusted you. I felt you were false and deceitful. I am never deceived in such matters. My first impressions of people are invariably right.
It seems to me, Miss Fairfax, that I'm trespassing on your valuable time. No doubt you have many other calls of a similar character to make in the neighborhood.
Gwendolyn, darling.
Ernest, my own Ernest. A moment. May I ask if you are engaged to be married to this young lady?
To dear little Cecily? Of course not. What could have put such an idea into your pretty little head?
Thank you, you may.
I knew there must be some misunderstanding, Miss Fairfax. The gentleman whose arm is at present round your waist is my dear guardian, Mr. John Worthy.
I beg your pardon?
This is Uncle Jack.
Jack? Oh!
Here is Ernest.
My own love.
A moment. Ernest, may I ask if you are engaged to be married to this young lady?
To what young lady? Gwendolyn? Of course not. What could have put such an idea into your pretty little head?
Thank you. You may.
I felt there was some slight error, Miss Cardew. The gentleman who is now embracing you is my cousin, Mr. Algernon Moncrief.
Algernon Moncrief? Oh, are you called Algernon?
I cannot deny it.
Oh!
Are you really John?
I could deny it if I liked. I could deny anything if I liked. But my name certainly is John. It has been John for years.
A gross deception has been practiced on both of us.
My poor wounded Cecily.
My sweet wronged Gwendolyn.
You will always call me sister, will you not?
There's just one question I would like to be allowed to ask my guardian.
An admirable idea. Mr. Worthing, where is your brother Ernest? Since we are both engaged to be married to your brother Ernest, it is a matter of some importance to us where your brother Ernest is at present.
Gwendolyn, Cecily, it is very painful for me to be forced to speak the truth. It is the first time in my life that I have ever been reduced to such a painful position. And I'm afraid that I have no experience in doing anything of the kind. However, I will tell you quite frankly that I have no brother Ernest. I have no brother at all. I never had a brother, and I have not the smallest intention of ever having one in the future.
No brother at all.
None.
Have you never had a brother of any kind?
Never. Not even of any kind.
I am afraid it is quite clear, dear Cecily, that neither of us is engaged to be married to anyone.
It is not a very pleasant position for a young girl to suddenly find herself in, is it?
Come, let us go into the house. They will hardly venture to come after us there.
No. Men are so cowardly, aren't they?
This ghastly state of things is what you call bunburying, I suppose.
Yes, and a perfectly wonderful Bunbury it is too. The most wonderful Bunbury I've ever had in my entire life.
Well, the only small satisfaction I get out of the whole of this wretched business is that your friend Bunbury is quite exploded. You won't be able to run down to the country quite as often as you used to do, Algy. And a very good thing, too.
Your brother is a little off color, isn't he, dear Jack? You won't be able to go in town as often as your wicked custom once was. And not a bad thing either.
As for your conduct toward Miss Cardew, I think that your taking in a sweet, simple, innocent girl like that is quite inexcusable. To say nothing of the fact that she is my ward.
I can find no possible defense for your deceiving a brilliant, clever, thoroughly experienced young lady like Miss Fairfax, to say nothing of the fact that she is my cousin.
I wanted to be engaged to Gwendolyn, that is all. I love her.
And I simply wanted to be engaged to Cecily. I adore her.
There's certainly no chance of your marrying Miss Cardew.
And I don't think, Jack, that there's much likelihood of you and Miss Fairfax being united.
How you can sit there calmly eating muffins while we are in this horrible trouble, I can't make out. You seem to me to be perfectly heartless.
Well, I can't eat muffins in an agitated manner. The butter would probably get on my cuffs. One should always eat muffins quite calmly. It is the only way to eat them.
I say it is perfectly heartless. You're eating muffins at all under the circumstances.
Whenever I am in trouble, eating is the only thing that consoles me. Indeed, whenever I am really in great trouble, as anyone who knows me intimately will tell you, I refuse everything except food and drink. At the present moment, I'm eating because I'm unhappy. Besides, I am particularly fond of muffins.
That is no reason why you should be eating them all in that greedy manner.
I wish that you would take tea cake. I don't like tea cake instead.
Good heavens. I suppose a man may be able to eat his own muffins in his own garden.
But you just said it was perfectly heartless to be eating muffins.
I said it was perfectly heartless under the circumstances. That is a very different thing.
That may be, but the muffins are the same.
Algy, I wish to goodness you would go.
I cannot. I've just made arrangements with Dr. Chasuble to be christened at 5:45 under the name of Ernest.
My dear fellow, the sooner you give up that nonsense, the better. I made arrangements with Dr. Chasuble myself this morning to be christened at 5:30, and I will naturally take the name of Ernest. Gwendolen would wish it. Besides, we can't both be christened Ernest. It would be absurd. I have a perfect right to be christened if I like. There is no evidence that I have ever been christened by anybody. I should think it extremely probable that it never was so, and so does Dr. Chasuble. It is entirely different in your case. You have been christened already.
Yes, but I haven't been christened in years.
Yes, but you have been christened. That's the important thing.
Quite so. So I know my constitution can stand it. If you aren't quite sure about your ever having been christened, I think it rather dangerous you're venturing upon it now. It might make you unwell. Jack, you would be at the muffins again. I wish you wouldn't. I told you, I am particularly fond of muffins.
Algy, I have already told you to go. I don't want you here. Why don't you go?
I haven't finished my tea yet.
You're drinking my tea.
It isn't your tea. You're eating my muffins.
They are not your muffins.
The fact that they did not at once follow us into the house, as anyone else would have done, seems to me to show that they have some sense of shame left.
They have been eating muffins. That looks like repentance.
They are looking at us. What effrontery.
They're approaching. That's very forward of them.
Let us preserve a dignified silence.
Certainly. It is the only thing to do now.
This dignified silence seems to produce a most unpleasant effect.
Most distasteful.
But we must not be the first to speak.
Certainly not.
Mr. Irving, there is something very particular I need to ask you. Much depends on your reply.
Mr. Moncrief, kindly answer me the following question. Why did you pretend to be my guardian's brother?
In order that I might have an opportunity of meeting you.
That certainly seems a satisfactory explanation, does it not?
Mr. Irving, what explanation can you offer to me for pretending to have a brother? Was it in order that you might have the opportunity of coming up to town to see me as often as possible?
Certainly, Miss Fairfax.
Their explanations appear quite satisfactory.
I am more than content with what Mr. Moncrief said.
Do you think we should forgive them?
Yes. No. I mean, no.
True, I had forgotten. There are principles at stake that one cannot surrender. Which one of us is going to tell them? The task is not a pleasant one.
Can we not both speak at the same time?
An admirable idea. Will you take the time for me?
Certainly. Your Christian names are still an insufferable barrier. That is all.
Will you take the time for me?
Our Christian names, is that all? But we are going to be christened this afternoon.
For my sake, you are prepared to do this terrible thing?
I am.
To please me, you are ready to face this fearful ordeal?
I am.
How absurd to talk of the equality of the sexes. Where matters of self-sacrifice are concerned, men are infinitely beyond us.
We are.
They have moments of physical courage of which we women know absolutely nothing.
Darling.
Darling.
Lady Bracknell.
Good heavens.
Gwendolen, what does this mean?
Merely that I'm engaged to be married to Mr. Irving, Mama.
Sit down. Apprised, sir, of my daughter's sudden flight by her trusty maid, whose confidence I purchased by means of a small coin, I followed her at once by a luggage train. Of course, Mr. Worthing, you will clearly understand that all communication between yourself and my daughter must cease immediately from this moment. On this point, as indeed on all points, I am firm.
I am engaged to be married to Gwendolen, Lady Bracknell.
You are nothing of the kind, sir. And now is my regards to Algernon. Algernon!
Yes, Aunt Augusta.
May I ask if it is in this house that your invalid friend Mr. Bunbury resides?
Oh no, Bunbury doesn't live here. Bunbury is somewhere else at present. In fact, Bunbury is dead.
Dead? When did Mr. Bunbury die? His death must have been extremely sudden.
Bunbury has exploded. Oh, I killed Bunbury this afternoon. Bunbury died this afternoon. I should say the doctors found out that Bunbury could not live, so Bunbury died.
Well, he seems to have had great confidence in the opinion of his physicians. I am glad, however, that he made up his mind at the last to some definite course of action and acted under proper medical advice. And now that we have buried Mr. Bunbury at last, may I ask, Mr. Worthing, who is that young girl whose hand my nephew Algernon is now holding in what seems to me a peculiarly unnecessary manner?
That is Miss Cecily Cardew, my ward.
I'm engaged to be married to Cecily, Aunt Augusta.
I beg your pardon?
Mr. Moncrief and I are engaged to be married, Lady Bracknell.
I do not know whether there's anything peculiarly exciting in the air of this part of Hertfordshire, but the amount of engagements that go on seem to me considerably above the proper average that statistics have laid down for our guidance. I think some preliminary inquiry on my part would not be out of place. Mr. Worthing, who is Miss Cardew?
Miss Cardew is the granddaughter of the late Mr. Thomas Cardew of 149 Belgrave Square, SW, Gervase Park, Dorking, Surrey, and the Sporran, Fifeshire, NB.
That sounds not unsatisfactory. 3 addresses always inspire confidence, even in tradesmen. So far, I am satisfied.
I have also in my possession, you will be pleased to hear, certificates of Miss Cardew's birth, registration, baptism, whooping cough, vaccination, confirmation, and the measles, both the German and the English variety.
A life crowded with incident, I see. Perhaps somewhat too exciting for a young girl. I am not myself in favor of premature experiences. Gwendolen, the time approaches for our departure. We have not a minute to lose. As a matter of form, Mr. Worthing, I had better ask you if Miss Cardew has any little fortune.
Oh, about £130,000 in the funds. That is all. Goodbye, Lady Bracknell. So pleased to have seen you.
A moment, Mr. Worthing. £130,000? And in the funds? Miss Cardew seems to be a most attractive young woman now that I look at her. Come here, dear. Sweet child. Your dress is sadly simple, and your hair seems as nature might have left it, but we can soon alter that. A thoroughly experienced French maid produces a marvelous result in a very brief space of time. I remember recommending one to young Lady Lansing, and after 3 months, her own husband did not know her.
And after 6 months, nobody knew her.
Kindly turn round, sweet child. Algernon.
Yes, Aunt Augusta.
There are distinct social possibilities in Miss Cardew.
Cecily is the sweetest, prettiest, dearest girl in the whole world. And I don't care 2 pence about social possibilities.
Never speak disrespectfully of society, Algernon. Only people who can't get into it do that. Dear child, of course you are quite aware that Algernon has nothing but its debts to depend upon. But I myself am not in favor of mercenary marriages. When I married Lord Bracknell, I had no fortune of any kind. But I never dreamed for a moment of letting that stand in my way. Well, I suppose I must give you my consent.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
Cecily, you may kiss me.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
The marriage, I think, had better take place quite soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
To speak frankly, I'm not myself in favor of long engagements. They give people the opportunity of finding out each other's characters before marriage, which I think is never advisable.
I beg your pardon, Lady Bracknell, but this engagement is quite out of the question. I am Miss Cardew's guardian. She cannot marry without my consent until she comes of age, and that consent I absolutely decline to give.
Upon what grounds, may I ask?
It pains me very much, Lady Bracknell, to speak frankly to you about your nephew, but I suspect him of being untruthful.
Untruthful? My nephew Algernon me in.
I fear there can be no possible doubt about the matter. This afternoon, during my temporary absence in London on an important question of romance, he obtained admission into my house by means of a false pretense of being my brother. Under an assumed name, he succeeded in the course of the afternoon by alienating the affections of my only ward. He subsequently stayed to tea and devoured every single muffin. And what makes his conduct all the more heartless is that he knew from the first that I have no brother and that I never had a brother, not even of any kind. I distinctly told him so myself yesterday afternoon.
Mr. Worthing, after careful consideration, I have decided to entirely overlook my nephew's conduct to you. Come here, sweet child. How old are you, dear?
Well, I'm really only 18, but I was mid-20 when I go to evening parties.
So it will not be long till you are of age and free from the restraints of tutelage. So I don't think your guardian's consent, after all, a matter of any importance.
Pray excuse me, Lady Bracknell, for interrupting you again, but I think it is only fair to tell you that, according to the terms of her grandfather's will, Miss Cardew does not come legally of age till she is 35.
That does not seem to me to be a grave objection. 35 is a very attractive age. London society is full of women who have, of their own free choice, remained 35 for years.
Algie, could you wait for me till I'm 35?
Of course I could, darling. You know I could.
Yes, I felt it instinctively. But I couldn't wait all that time.
Then what is to be done, Cecily?
I don't know, Mr. Moncrief.
My dear Mr. Worthing, as Miss Cardew states positively that she cannot wait till she is 35, a remark which I am bound to say shows a somewhat impatient nature, I would beg of you to reconsider your decision.
But, my dear Lady Bracknell, the matter is entirely in your own hands. The moment you consent to my marriage with Gwendolen, I will most gladly allow your nephew to form an alliance with my ward.
Mr. Worthing, you must be quite aware that that which you propose is out of the question.
Then a passionate celibacy is all that any of us can look forward to.
Oh, that is not the destiny I propose for Gwendolen. Algernon, of course, can choose for himself. Come, dear, we must be going. We have missed 5, if not 6 trains.
Is everything quite ready for the christenings?
Christening, sir? Is that not somewhat premature?
Both these gentlemen have expressed a desire for immediate christening.
At their age? The idea is grotesque and irreligious. Algernon, I will forbid you to be christened. I will not hear of such excesses. Lord Bracknell would be highly displeased if he knew that that was the way you wasted your time and money.
Am I to understand, then, that there are to be no christenings at all this afternoon?
I'm afraid that, as things now stand, it would be of no practical value to either of us, Dr. Chasuble.
I am grieved to hear such sentiments from you, Mr. Worthing. I must return to the church at once. Indeed, I have just been informed that for the last hour and a half, Miss Prism has been waiting for me in the vestry.
Miss Prism? Did I hear you mention a Miss Prism?
Yes, Lady Bracknell. I'm on my way to join her.
Pray allow me to detain you for a moment. This matter may prove to be one of vital importance to Lord Bracknell and myself. Is this Miss Prism a female of repellent aspect, remotely connected with education?
She is the most cultivated of ladies, and the very picture of respectability.
It is obviously the same person. May I ask what position she holds in your household?
I am a celibate, madam.
Miss Prism has been, for the last 3 years, Miss Cardew's esteemed governess and valued companion.
I must see this Miss Prism at once. Let her be sent for.
I was told you expected me in the vestry, dear Canon. I've been waiting for you there for 1 hour and 3/4.
Prism!
Lady Bracknell.
Come here, Prism! Prism, where is that baby? 27 years ago, Prism, you left Lord Bracknell's house, number 104 Upper Grosvenor Street, in charge of a perambulator that contained a baby of the male sex. You never returned. A few weeks later, through elaborate investigation of the Metropolitan Police, the perambulator was discovered at midnight, standing by itself in a remote corner of Bayswater. It contained the manuscript of a 3-volume novel of more than usually revolting sentimentality. But the baby was not there, Prism. Prism, where is that baby?
Lady Lady Bracknell, I admit with shame that I do not know. I only wish I did. The plain facts of the case are these. On the morning of the day that you mentioned, a day that is forever branded on my memory, I prepared as usual to take the baby out in the perambulator. I had also with me a somewhat old but capacious handbag in which I intended to place the manuscript of a work of fiction which I had written in my few unoccupied hours. In a moment of mental abstraction, I deposited the manuscript in the bassinet and placed the baby in the handbag.
But where did you deposit the handbag?
Do not ask me, Mr. Worthing.
Miss Prism, this is a matter of no small importance to me. I must know where you deposited the handbag.
In the cloakroom at Victoria Station, the Brighton line.
I must retire to my room for a moment. Gwendolyn, wait here for me.
If you are not too long, I will wait for you all my life.
What do you suppose this means, Lady Bracknell?
I dare not even suspect Dr. Chasuble.
Uncle Jack seems strangely agitated.
Your guardian has a very emotional nature.
This noise is extremely unpleasant.
It has stopped now.
I wish you would arrive at some conclusion.
The suspense is terrible. I hope it will last.
Is this the handbag, Miss Prism? Examine it carefully before you speak. The happiness of more than one life depends on your answer.
It seems to be mine. Yes, here's an injury received through the upsetting of an omnibus Gower Street. And here, on the lock are my initials. The bag is undoubtedly mine. I'm delighted to have it unexpectedly restored to me. It has been a great inconvenience being without it all these years.
Miss Prism, more was restored to you than the handbag. I was the baby you placed in it.
You?
Yes, Mother!
But Mr. Worthing, I'm married.
Unmarried? I do not deny that this is a serious blow. However, who can cast a stone against one who has suffered? Cannot repentance wipe out an act of folly? Why should there be one law for men and another for women? Mother, I forgive you.
Mr. Worthing, there is some error. There is a lady who can tell you who you really are.
Lady Bracknell, I hate to seem inquisitive, but would you kindly inform me who I am?
I do not know whether the news I have to give you will altogether please you, but you are the son of my poor sister, Mrs. Moncrief, and consequently, Algernon's elder brother.
Algy's elder brother? Then I have a brother after all. I always knew I had a brother. I always said I had a brother. Cecily, how could you ever doubt that I had a brother? Dr. Chasuble, my unfortunate brother. Gwendolyn, my unfortunate brother.
Not you. But what are you? What is your Christian name now that you have become someone else?
Good heavens, I had quite forgotten that point. Aunt Augusta, at the time when Miss Prism left me in the handbag, had I been christened already?
Every luxury that money could buy, including christening, had been lavished on you by your fond and doting parents.
Then I have been christened. That is settled. Now, what name was I given? Let me know the worst.
Being the eldest son, you were naturally christened after your father.
Yes, but what was our father's Christian name?
I remember now that the general was called Ernest. I knew I had some particular reason for disliking the name.
Ernest, I felt from the first that you could have no other name.
Gwendolyn, at last.
Letitia, at last.
Frederick last.
Cecily at last.
My own Ernest.
And that's when I realized the importance of being earnest.